knowledge. And okay, thanks. This meeting is being recorded. It's this bringing people together. And so this knowledge, if our intuitive sense is we did this amazing thing because one or two charismatic leaders did it, then they don't actually understand the power of their group and what it is that they need to keep doing in order to continue innovating. So this is the idea about network analysis, about what it shows us. So we have people, dots, circles, nodes, ties between them, what's flowing in a network, and then also characteristics. And all of these things are things we look at. There are also two different types of analysis we do. There are networks that are centered around a person, which we call ego networks. What does one person's network look like? Who's in it? How diverse is it? And then we have networks like this that show what's the whole community that you might be embedded in. So this might be a network of a public health coalition and all of the agencies who are connected. We look at slightly different things when we look at these different types of networks, but we're going to look now at what can these networks show us. People who study strokes and whether or not people are able to quickly identify the symptoms of a stroke and get their loved ones to a hospital have actually found that it's the characteristics of a network that predicts how quickly people get care. So which network gets people the fastest care? Network A, which is kind of bifurcated. There are two different sectors of this network that don't know each other very well. Or network B, where everyone in the network knows each other. Who knows the answer to this question? Which network gets people stroke recognition and delivery to the hospital faster? Network A or network B? Raise your hand if you think B. All right, raise your hand if you think A. We have a couple of shy people on A. Here's your first lesson. Your personal intuition is almost always wrong. People in network A arrive at the hospital faster, and that's because their network has more diverse knowledge, and it doesn't suffer from the self-reinforcing. When we have strong ties, one person's like, I don't know. Either you don't know and nobody else in your network knows, or you have strong influence on other people, and one person who says, I don't think this is a problem, can keep everybody else in line. But more diverse networks will give you more information and point new directions. So network analysis has real implications for our health, our livelihood, and what we do. College student networks. We have three different types. We have tight knitters. These are people who do all the same stuff. They recreate with them, they go to class with them, they ask for help. All that stuff is in one network. Then there's compartmentalizers. These people have a social network and an academic network. And then we have samplers, people who are really strongly embedded in any network. They're kind of testing out relationships with different people. These networks are especially important for students who come from families that don't have a history and background in higher education. Underrepresented youth, we know that their social networks have a big impact on their outcomes in school. Which one of these networks produces the best outcomes for students in college? A, B, or C? Some people say C. Who says B? And who says A? All right, the answer is A, except that A produces both the best and the worst outcomes. Now, remember what I said before about the stroke? These are like large networks, right? So if it's large and diverse, you have access to information. And if you're struggling in school, if you're out partying with your friends, but they know you're struggling, they might say, you should not be here. You should go home. Or you might be whining at the bar and they'll say, I'll study with you tomorrow, right? So that's how networks can be resilient. But strongly connected networks can also be destructive in the other way. So what do we do when we know these tight knitter networks, can produce the best or the worst outcomes? This is my personal field of knowledge that I love to do research on, is how do we create social change? And right now, you all have probably heard of Malcolm Gladwell's book that came out over a decade ago, The Tipping Point. And he really popularized this idea that central people in a network can influence a lot of people. The problem with that idea is that that's not actually how change happens. It's how information gets sparked and shared quickly. So a narrow bridge, kind of one tie between one group and another, can spread information, but it doesn't build community capacity to tackle complex things like violence prevention at the community level. We need more bridges. So if we're trying to get people to do something risky and new, like get the COVID vaccine, one person spreading information isn't going to get you there. So the resistors in my household, because I have resistors in my family, they had to get the message about the COVID vaccine from a lot of people, from me, from my kids, me sharing what my scientist, geeky, nerdy vaccine friends had to say, from their coworkers. And the tipping point was when their company gave them a $500 check. So 5 pieces of information plus a check is what got them there. So that's this idea of wide bridges, not just one person, you know, Fauci standing up on TV and saying this vaccine is good for you, right? That's not enough. So why should we visualize networks for our community partners, with our community partners, and how do we use them to actually improve the sharing of knowledge, our ability to act on scientific knowledge? Why should we do it? The first is because networks can reveal what's hidden. The way work gets done in the world is through our social ties with each other. But those networks are hidden. We don't actually know who all is in them or what they look like. Now, you all have a sense of them, right? You might have one of these super connectors in your family. My husband's grandmother is one of them. She has a black book with everybody's name and address in it. And if you want to talk to anybody from anybody in the family and their history, like if I want to, you know, find out where cousin George's first girlfriend is, she still has her number, even though they broke up in 1997. She still knows how to reach her. So some people are super connectors, and those people are easy to spot. But there are other people who are sleeper connectors in our networks, and we don't know who they are. This is 2 counties in Colorado. Larimer, the county I live in, is colored red. Weld is the county next over, colored green. And these 2 counties want to do better collaboration and economic development. And what they want is to form a steering committee that crosses over the economic sectors in the 2 counties and bridges them. The first thing we noticed when we looked at this network is this purple node in the middle. One of the nodes that connects both of those 2 counties to each other is not a person who lives in either county. They live in Denver, which is the state capital, which makes sense. This person is an elected official. No surprise there. So, but how do we help them find those people who are the sleeper connectors? Social network analysis has these statistics that we can use to identify who connects people diversely across the network. And the name of this statistic is betweenness. You don't care about this. What you care about is that this identifies the usual suspect. Who has the most ties, and the most ties that are located in the network that reach one sector and then reach over to the other side. But the problem with that is that it finds the popular people, which we'll call the usual suspects. Anybody know who the usual suspects are in any community if you're looking at economic development? Who's most likely to be that super connector like my husband's grandmother? Who are they? What economic sector do they come from? Anybody know? Guesses? Say that again.
Economic, you said?
Yeah. What economic sector?
You said middle.
You think the middle sector. Okay, I'm thinking about like specific industry sectors. Anybody know who they are? They have a name, a job. What's a job name? Teachers, who else? Bartenders, who else? Realtors. Realtors have massive networks, right? But teachers also have big networks because they see so many kids every year, right? They're connected to families. All right, so the usual suspects helps us find those people. But what we really care about are the people who are really connecting unusual types to each other. So we just ran a little regression, the total number of ties that you have. So realtors have lots of ties, teachers have lots of ties. And then we looked at this other betweenness score and looked at who had a higher connection across the network score that is predicted just by their total number, right? So the realtors are out here, on 8 through 10, but some of them are below the bar. Some of them are in that blue area. And so these are the people that are the unusual suspects. It's not just how many people you know, but how much you bridge across sectors. This is a different group that we named key actors. And they're the unexpected connectors. They aren't connectors just because they have a big network. So we identified a list of 12 of these, and then we mapped them and sized them. So in this network, you can see the size of them is based on how much of a key actor they are. And then we colored them by the sector that they come from, which allowed us to invite and select a community steering committee that was more diverse and more connected. And we could have never done this if we just done it by nomination. We'd have ended up with the usual suspects. So here's one way that using social networks helps us find what's hidden in order to do something stronger. And then this is the whole network with just those key connectors colored and everybody else kind of in gray. Our next example is how do we improve mental health services? Lots of groups got this funding called the Safe Schools, Healthy Students Grant to try to reduce violence. And we know there are lots of things that contribute to that. You know your own personal history of trauma. We know what's happening in your family dynamics right now. We know substance use, all those things have an impact. We worked with one really large district and we looked at what's the traditional model of mental health service referrals. And that's on the top. So it starts with a teacher and a kid, and they're like, oh, this kid needs help. And so they refer them to a small group of people. And then that group talks about the kid, and then they get a referral out to a community partner. But this small team, mental health teams, they usually are spending most of their time delivering services. They don't have time to know who all the people are in the community that they could refer out to. And they don't actually have all of the experience to really assess a kid. So then we worked with a school that had innovated their own strategy, which is this big red node in the middle. This person is a dean of students, but this dean of students is a social worker. And their job was not to provide any direct services to kids. It was to be in that middle space, the hub between the mental health team and teachers that were receiving recommendations from kids who needed help, and then referring them out to the community, really thinking about who has bandwidth. Does this kid have insurance? Does this kid not have insurance? Does this kid have other issues that they might really need help with? And so we kind of used network visualizations to help them see what was different about what they had developed and how they've been doing it before. And what we knew is that the old model at every school was letting kids fall through the cracks and not get the services they need. This new one was really improving kids getting services. So that first one was a conceptual diagram of what they were doing and how that position was supposed to work so they could share it and talk to other people about it. Then we modeled what was actually happening in their network. And what we saw with this dean over here in the right-hand side is that this network is way more efficient because you have a central clearing place that all references go into. What's happening in the other one, it looks like it has a lot more connections, it looks more connected. Now remember back, we looked at those other ones, right? How does the structure affect the team? And what we found in other schools that are like this, there's lots of connections, but you still end up with kids who fall through the cracks because there's no one trying to do that matching and really make sure that kids get the service that they need. So in this one, all the mental health workers were exhausted. All of them were worried that their kids were not getting the services that they need. So having a mental health team of social workers placed in a school really does improve information flow throughout the school community. Having a mental health team gets it more connected, gets more ties, gets more lines here. It looks more like a ball of string. But having one person who's a hub in a really big high school with a mental health team improves the flow through the community, increases the centrality of the mental health team, that people consistently refer there, and it improves the efficiency, which we all know that teachers and mental health workers are exhausted by how much relationship building they have to do. So if you can increase the efficiency of a network, you can do a better job providing services and connecting kids. Now, also at this school, we wanted to use network analysis to help them work on their big challenge, which in this district is the school to prison pipeline, because they have problems with gangs. I'm sorry, I didn't put the key on this, the legend on this. Red nodes are administrators like principals. Blue nodes are security, so either working for the school district as security or sworn police officers placed in the school. So you can see they have a bunch, right? Purple nodes are special education teachers. Green nodes are social workers. Yellow nodes are teachers. And the orange nodes are counselors. When we did a walkthrough in this school, we said to them, I can tell by walking through your campus that you have not built the most robust system for knowledge exchange and support for kids, because you have spatially segregated people. You've got all the special education teachers in one wing, one building of your campus, and you've got all of your campus security officers on the other side. We've been studying these teams for a long time, and what we find is that the most robust teams have a central network that includes an administrator, a campus security person, a counselor, a special ed teacher, a social worker. When you have all 5 of those colors in the middle of your network in nodes that are similar in size, that's when you have the most resilient network, the greatest ability to identify those kids who might be school shooters, to prevent stuff, and to get all kids the help you need. When I told them that, when I just told a story, they were like, that doesn't work for us. We've got to have these security officers over in this building. And this frustrates me. When I say, you paid me a lot of money to give you science-based expertise, and you don't want to follow it. They're like, well, we have constraints, we can't work on this. Then we surveyed every teacher, every custodian, every kitchen worker, every campus security officer in their school, and we got back this graphic. And you know what the principal said to me? He said, why are all my security folks clustered over there and not connected to teachers? And I just looked at him and said, why do you think? And he said, that's because I put them in that building far away, right? And I said, yes, it is. So my experience with using network maps is to reveal what is hidden. In this one, you can see how strong that social worker who we saw in the previous graphs is a hub. You can see that person is super connected to the special ed teachers, not super connected to the counselors, but as big a node in the middle as the principal of the school. So they have the first building block of a really resilient network in their school, but they're missing that blue node being in the middle, and they're missing it because they didn't understand that spatial segregation impacts their social network. And this principal was so excited by this that he took our recommendations. Our experience is revealing what's visible makes it possible for people to take new action. It's kind of a glitch in human thinking and perception. Good stories are not enough. People need to see it be tangible, just like this story about grams of fat versus a Happy Meal and French fries and buttered popcorn, right? Something about the visual communication is what helps people understand the problem and take action. So network visualizations help us understand the problem. Here's a school we also visited. I knew there was something super weird happening at the school. They were keeping track of incident reports on 3x5 cards at the secretary's desk in the front office. And I was like, how do you guys work on comprehensive prevention if you keep this stuff not where you can look at it and visualize it? Then when I got this graphic back, I said, what the heck is going on over here on the right-hand side of this network? Why do you have a big red node that connects to this other group that to me looks like a separate community? And they said, oh, we're a school within a school. And I said, what? You gave us a tour of your building and you didn't tell us you have a school within a school. What's going on? And they said, oh, that's where we put all the kids with high emotional needs. And I said, how's that working for you? And they said, oh, it's a struggle. That's why our assistant principal is over there. Look how big that node is. It's super big because he's bridging those sectors of a network, which means that this person is burnt out, which means that they lose this person faster than other kinds of things. And if I had said to them, just based on storytelling, you need to really rethink how you structure the school within a school, they might have said, we don't want to. But when they saw this, they said, why is that person such a big node? And I said, it's because you put them in a really uncomfortable position. So revealing what is hidden lets us take better action. It also helps us to identify underserved populations. This is a project I did with my students for a community partner. SAVA is the acronym name. It's the Sexual Assault Victims Advocacy Center in our community. And they knew that there were people that they were probably not serving very well, but they didn't know who they are. So that's the perfect question for social network analysis, because network analysis can help reveal what is hidden. My students did a whole bunch of things. The first thing they did was interview survivors who had received services. And this is the network of one particular woman, but it's very common for what the network looks like. Here, the green lines are when the person who experienced sexual violence reached out to someone. So that's them reaching out for help. They're visualized here as directed ties. You can see who they reached to. The gray ones are when they met with that person, who did they refer them to? So she first told her priest, and then her priest said, you really need to talk to the Denver PD. She was living in Denver, and Denver PD said, well, this actually happened in Fort Collins. Even though you're a resident here, you need to talk to Fort Collins, and we need to connect these two. And so she did. Then after getting police involved, she still needed more support. She reached out to both her boyfriend and her friend. And they both said, you need to keep getting counseling. You need to keep going back to your priest. He's really supporting you and helping you deal with this. So keep reaching out to him. And then someone said, you probably should also connect to the sexual assault victims advocates. And so then she reached out to them based on several people mentioning it and saying they can probably help you. The police officers in our town always bring the advocates in, and other people do also. So there were lots of referrals. I just didn't visualize them here. I don't know. I was, I don't know, sleep deprived when I made the slide, I guess. Then we looked at the networks for men, and this really bugged me. All of our networks for men started with men many years after their assault, reaching out to a friend, either a girlfriend or sibling or a boyfriend, and saying what I experienced. Maybe it was sexual assault. And what happened in those meetings was that their closest ties said yes. They affirmed for them what they experienced was sexual violence, and they got no referrals. So these men end up getting help in their anger management classes, going to see a therapist, and actively seeking online research, trying to figure out what had they experienced and are there resources. Most of the men got to SAVA from a web search, not from anyone, not from a therapist, not from family members, and not from police officers saying you need an advocate. And this really upset me. But luckily, I had the guy in the hat, this young gay man in my class, and he did the next set of diagrams we're going to look at. And so he was brave enough in class. The other guys, the young Black men are athletes, they were also in my class. And this young gay man was brave enough to say, we need to talk about these results, which were different groups research in class. He said, we got to talk about that. And I said, let's do, because I don't know what to make of this. And he said, here's the deal. Young gay men are most likely for their very first sexual interaction to be with someone who is much older than them and in a position of power. And so most of them have an abusive, if not sexually violent relationship as their first encounter. And I was standing in front of class, kind of stunned to hear this, right? And I said, oh my gosh. And then one of these athletes said, I'm not going to name names, but I got to tell you, it's not just young gay men who get assaulted. And we just don't talk about it. We keep it quiet and we don't tell. And so in that moment, in that heaviness in class, we understood that men were the most underserved population, and that young gay men were underserved in different ways than straight men, and that the barriers that young gay men and that tough guy athletes have to reaching out and getting services are equally strong, but different, culturally different. So that's our first insight. Then we started looking at the networks of agencies and how they relate to each other. And we were studying all the nonprofits in town that Sava said they might have any relationships with. So we had a big list. We knew who the big social service agencies were. You can see we've coded them here by color. So police, social services, mental health, legal, housing, health, education, lobbying. So these are all the other NGOs that Sava knows that they relate to. They might get referrals from, or they might refer out to. So we started with a big list of all the agencies. Then Sava said, these are the ones that we relate to. And we surveyed all of them. And this is what the young man in my class, this is the analysis that he did with his group. When we look at interagency referrals, we first looked at those types of ties directed ones, people referring into you. So we looked at which agencies were getting referrals into them, who's sending their clients to other agencies. So we see this green node, Sava, and then we also see this yellow node, the Lambda Center, which is a social service organization that serves the LGBTQ community. And we thought, it's really interesting. The Lambda Center is about the same size as Sava in terms of their place in the community. Then we looked at their out-degree referrals. And we noticed how big the Lambda Center was. And we thought, they're kind of in the middle on in-degree, but they're one of the biggest out-degrees. I said, you got to find out what that is. So they went and did interviews with Lambda, and Lambda said, well, of course we're the biggest out-degree. That's obvious. And we said, well, not to us. And they said, we don't provide any social services. We're just a community center. People come here and hang out because it's safe, because other agencies are not safe. And we thought, then we said, we're confused. Why are other agencies referring people to you? And they said, because we're safe. I said, but you don't provide services? And they said, well, but we know who is safe, and we can refer people to safe services that we know are going to support our people. And I thought, that's really important. We talked about this in class. We had another group that was doing observations at the center, looking at their online presence. And this is what my students said. How do we tell Sava that we don't feel safe in their office when all of their images, all of their art on the wall, all of their website, all of everything is images of women? And remember what we learned from the men? How do men find out about Sava? On the web. The most important thing we can do is get the web presence to have men in it to change their outreach. That's what one of the groups did, was give them recommendations about how to change their website. When they're hiring, they have pictures that say both men and women work here, so that every page you go to of their services has some images of men. This is what it looked like right the year after my students joined them, and I checked it out last night. Notice the page for adult survivors. Behind that image is a man showing us that men are survivors, knowing that this is an important message to communicate, and it changes their outreach. So the solution to young gay men being the most underserved and the Lambda Center being a safe place for people to go was to have the Sava trained counselors and therapists just go and run classes at the Lambda Center. This solution cost zero money and dramatically increased the capacity of this agency to serve the most underserved. Now, doing this research was, required some time and effort, but we never, ever would have gotten there if we weren't looking for what was hidden. The last one I'm going to tell you about is a success story from the COVID pandemic. Fort Morgan is a small town. I don't know. Now, I should know. 10,000 people in a county with 25,000 people in eastern Colorado. It has a really big meatpacking plant. And meatpacking plants were hotbeds for COVID. There's a big immigrant community there. the Somalis. And so at the very beginning of the pandemic, they trucked refrigerator trucks right up to Morgan County because they were worried about what they were going to do with bodies from a small town that has a tiny morgue. But they never needed them. Those refrigerator trailers just sat empty. Well, what happened? We've been trying to tell this story. It starts with the health navigators that are organized by a local nonprofit called One Morgan County. And this, like the Lambda Center, is a community center, and they think their job is to understand community needs and to serve them. And they built a team of women who are doing outreach. The name of this team is Trusted Connections, which is the perfect name because that's who these women are. They are people who are known and trusted in all of the many language speaking communities in this town. This town has Somali refugees. It has West and East African refugees. So in East Africa, there are many language groups, Somali being only one. In East Africa, there are French-speaking countries, but also other languages. So just the African immigrants have like 5 different languages that they speak. There are historic Hispanic communities, which is what Coloradans call themselves. Academics don't understand that choice of language, but it's what the historic population calls themselves in Colorado. There are also Spanish-speaking immigrants, most of them Central and South American, and they do not speak Spanish, even though they come from countries that we think of being Spanish-speaking. Okay, here's the most important thing I want you to get from today. The title of my talk is Inside Out. So I think now that I've been talking to you about what's hidden, you now understand why I titled it Inside Out. I should have given you this, but all that technology like kept me from doing the punchline first so you could follow along. Inside Out. The inside is who we are connected to. What is the web that characterizes our community? Doing good outreach, improving our outreach begins with understanding the inside. It does not start with what materials we want to share and then asking where and how to share it. It begins with saying, what is our community structure and web, and how do we use it? This community was super successful in getting people vaccinated and in preventing large numbers of death in this small rural county where uptake was really low, because in the rural places in Colorado, it's very conservative and people are very against anyone telling them what to do or how to live, as well as distrust in government. There's actually 7 people on that team, but I just visualized kind of 5 of them for you here. One of them is a Somali woman. One of them is a woman from West Africa, and one is a woman from East Africa. They all know each other, but the Somali community is distinct because their religion is distinct, because they are Muslims, and so their religious practices are different. And then we had, during the pandemic, there were just 5 of them, but now their team is 7. And 2 Latinas living in the community. So this is the group of 5 that turned the boat around. If we start with the inside, what are your existing connections? This is what we found. They all have many WhatsApp groups that are people they have their individual phone number for and are in many groups. We know who those WhatsApp groups are, and there's not one of them. There's many of them. There's the family WhatsApp group, and there's the entrepreneur WhatsApp group, and there's the mom's WhatsApp group. And there's Somali WhatsApp groups. There's the West African WhatsApp group. So they all have many of them. And they know these people by name. They talk to them face to face. They see them at parties. So these are those network diagrams we saw before of really densely connected communities. They're all embedded in a very densely connected community. What did they do? They did a lot. They used social media. They really explored their existing social ties. They organized new community events that were different than the state organized COVID events. They recognized that the services happening in the community were not serving their people. The food bank was giving people boxes of pasta and dehydrated mashed potatoes. None of these immigrant groups know what to do with any of them. So they created different food boxes during the height of the pandemic that gave people culturally specific food. And they started chatting with each other. Because most of their communication is in WhatsApp, most of the people that they're talking to that are these immigrant groups are not literate in their own language, let alone in English, which means that auditory communication and video communication is the best way to share. So they could share a picture of a flyer that they created and attach a little voice file to it and then push that out, both over Facebook pages where they have all these different groups and over their WhatsApp groups, so that people could listen to it and they heard the voice of a trusted connection. All the flyers that they made in 5 languages. So anytime they were advertising an event, a vaccination event, they produced 5 different versions in 5 languages. I don't know what is going on. There we go. The second thing they did is they didn't create new information. They just took information from the CDC and the state health department and they translated it. They translated it in 2 ways. They translated it into simple, easy action in normal community speak, and they translated it into their language. And so this translation of reaching out and bringing information in and then translating it was the key communication strategy they used. But they only did that because they knew already what the channels were that they were going to do. So usually we do this the other way around. We start with what do we want to push out to people, and then we say, how do we get that to them? And we create the media first, and then we ask how to share it, instead of saying, how do we already share knowledge and information in our community? I guess these are all animated, super funny. And then they modified that information. Every piece of information that they shared, they put in multiple formats. So for one WhatsApp group, they might have shared it only as a voice file, like the moms group. They created a voice file, told them what's happening, tell your moms, they pushed that out. To a more general one, they made a little video, they posted that on Facebook. So it had a picture of the flyer translated in that language, and it also had their voice over it, so that they made everything really easy to share and easy to share in the ways and places that people were sharing. The flyers they also printed and they put them in every single food box that they delivered, but only the language that they were delivering food for, right? So if they were delivering food boxes for the Somali community, they put the Somali flyers in there. If they were delivering it to the Central American community, they put a Spanish flyer. These are your take-home messages. If you're taking pictures of the slides, this is it. Visual communication helps people understand what action to take. This is the example of the network for the high school, where I told them what they should do and they didn't want to hear it, but when they saw it, they said, oh, we'll take action. Our networks are hidden, both the structure of the network that constrains and inspires us, and the network that lets us take action in a more comprehensive way. And this is the most important thing for health communication. When you're working with a community and you're thinking, how do we share with them? How do we reach out? What are we doing? You have to start by understanding what is the web of connectivity and communication channels that people are already using. And then create your materials for that channel. And that's not my practice. That's what I learned from this community and then validated based on the science and the science of science communication. So I want to really credit One Morgan County for one of the most successful cases in the country of preventing a massive wave in their community. And what did they do that was innovative? It was this. Do we have time for one or two questions? Yeah, what questions do you have?
What is the program you use to make those?
To make those visualizations? There's a bunch of different ones. The question for people online is, what program do we use? This is Smart Art in PowerPoint. And so I can't edit stuff in here, but this one is Smart Art in PowerPoint. And then this one is called NetDraw, and it's part of the social network package called UCINet. So you can manage your network data in here and do the visualization all in one program. So people who are just starting to use, I coach them to use this. There are other ones that make nicer, prettier visualizations. Gephi is one of those. There's another free, easy one to use called Visone, V-I-S-O-N-E. So Vis1 is free, and you can put nodes in there and visualize, and it's pretty easy. So those are the ones that I have people start with. There are others, like if you have a mathematician in your group, the statistical package R has all kinds of cool network things, and you can like pre-program what the color spectrum and scheme is, and you can repeat things. If you're, say you were studying a network over time, you could, you know, pre-program and just use that code to create the same visualizations that would match time over time. Yeah.
Maybe I missed this somehow, but so really put sort of understanding what data you collect.
Oh yeah. That's a fabulous question. Thank you for asking it. What data do you need in order to have diagrams like this? So we call it relational data. And the easiest way to think about it is that you need a spreadsheet that has 3 columns. It has the first person, who we call the ego, the person doing the rating. So that's me, Jeni. And then the next column, the people that I'm going to tell you about my relationship with. So Jeni rates Susie, right? So Jeni's in the first column and then Susie. And then my relationships. Now it can be a 0 or 1, like Susie is my friend. And you can have a whole string of relationships out, right? So you can have 5 relationships. So Jeni rates Susie, and then what's the tie? And those ties can be a 0, 1, present or not present, or it could be related, right? Like how much do you trust Susie could be on a scale of 5. So person doing the rating, their person, and then all the ties that they have. That's called, you're not gonna love this. It's called an edge array. But then the next one, if I rate Michael, then the next row down in the spreadsheet is gonna be Jeni, Michael, and then all my ties to Michael. So that's the way. There are other ways to do it. The math on this is done on a matrix. So then, you know, if this network, I don't know how many ties are in this, like 30 something, has every agency, it's actually agency 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way across the top. And then agency 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down. It's called a square matrix because what's in the rows and the columns are exactly the same. It's like a mileage table. So data can be collected like that, but only if it's super dense. But each matrix that you do like that, like a mileage table, can have only one relationship. So you need a spreadsheet for trust. Does the Lambda Center trust Sava? And then if you say referrals in and out, like this diagram is the out degree referrals, who do you send referrals to? That needs another page, out referrals. Who sends referrals to you? That needs another page. So if you do it in the square matrix and you have a small network, it makes sense, but every sheet in your worksheet is a different tie. If you want to condense it, then you do Sava, Lambda, in degree, out degree. You could have 10 relationships. So that's the more kind of simple way to collect it. So Excel spreadsheets are how we record it. And then all of these network programs know how to like read that stuff and do something with it. But the basic thing, to get to your question, what does this data look like? This data look like you have 2 entities, persons or organizations, and some information about the relationship or the tie between them. Do you share information? Do you send money? Do you get funding from them? Do you trust them? Do you know them? Any of the things that's about them. So you need to know the 2 social entities and what's being shared between. And lots of data looks like this. You can take meeting data and turn it into network data. There's all kinds of existing data that you can use to become network data.
Is there number of those pilot skirts you want. And those,
Yeah, so the question for people online is how many of those do you need? The people who do analysis inside organizations, how is an organization functioning and what's going on? They have a magic set of 3 questions that they ask. If you're trying to really uncover how do people in this organization work together, 3 questions. Who do you trust? Who do you hang out with, like go have beers with? And who do you get advice from? And those 3 questions, trust, advice, and social hanging out, will tell you the basic things you want to know about a whole group and its cohesion. In the green building one, we asked 6 questions. I asked, who do you know? Because I wanted a baseline, like who do you ever met face to face? Then I asked, who did you learn from? And who did you get support from? Because they were all doing something new. So trust, advice, and hangout might not be the ideal ones for yours. You know, we really wanted to know who'd you learn from and who gave you the support to do something new. But usually a small handful will give you really robust data. So when we're doing interagency, we always try to get who those sending and receiving ties for organizations. One final question. Thank you so much. Any questions online? No? All right. Really great to be here with you. I hope this was interesting.